What's going on, guys? Welcome to the show. Welcome to another Wednesday afternoon. I'm Ben Bateman here to talk to you about action movies. It's episode 101. We are covering, yes, you heard it correctly, Guardians of the Galaxy, and it is a superhero film. We're going to explain to you why right now. Come hang out with us. We'll see you in 1 second.
Welcome to Popcorn Talk, featuring movie discussion, news, and interviews. Popcorn Talk. We talk movies. And now, here's Popcorn Talk's Action Movie Anatomy.
Boom! Oh, it's a different vibe. It's no Still Dre. Oh,
Holy shit, Chris Pratt's here.
oh my God.
What is it like being married to Anna Faris?
It's pretty great. I'm pretty happy about it.
What's up, guys? Welcome to the show. Welcome to Action Movie Anatomy on this beautiful Wednesday afternoon. We're here to talk to you, the people, about action movies. And it's episode 101.
You're like Uncle Sam today.
Yeah.
It's like the second time.
A lot of
you've done
pointing.
it.
Yeah. Ha! Bang!
Dude, the Brotherhood, the trio, the Wolf Pack is back together.
Oh yeah, this is the first show we did like a secret Batman or Gotham.
It's out there. It's out there.
I'm
find
much
it.
larger than I am now.
He was in hibernation.
I was in hibernation. Yeah, we did the very first thing we ever did on camera together, Ben and I, and well, Alex as well. Guys, this is Alex Kessler.
Alex
Hi,
Kessler,
I'm
welcome
Alex
to the
Kessler.
show.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Star-Lord, please.
Star-Lord, excuse me. Was Star Captain? What is it? Star? What do they have written on his cell?
Oh, Star Prince? Is that what it is?
Something like that. We did a Gotham recap show for when the Gotham series came out on CW.
No, it's Fox.
No,
It's
Fox.
Fox, yeah.
Yeah.
2 years ago.
It was
two and a half.
The
3 years
best
ago?
thing that we came up with the entire thing was the title. It was called Gotham's Finest.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, and that was great. And like true story. So let's just do the quick introductions. Alex Kessler, where can the folks find you if they want to follow along?
You can find me on Twitter at Kess Wiley, or on our other podcast that we have. If you like really nerdy things, it's a good place to
We
go.
do Magic the Gathering stuff.
Yeah.
You've heard me talk about
It's
it.
called
Andrew?
Masters of Modern. You guys can find me at Andrew Ghai and at AMA Podcast, of course.
You guys can find me at Ben Bateman Media and also on the Nerdy Magic the Gathering podcast we do. But long story short, in the very beginning, Andrew and I were like, we should do some kind of content online because we should do something. And we were like getting into hosting. And it was like, all right, the Gotham show's coming out. After shows are pretty popular. This is before I ever knew about AfterBuzz TV.
We like Batman.
Yeah, so we called up Kessler, and he used to run this company called Webisodes Network, where I played a vampire on a show called Top Decking. I had all the gear. And so we were like, Alex,
have,
do you want to do like a recap show for Gotham at premieres? And he's like, sure, let's do it. So like, unlike this place where there's like a TriCaster and multiple cameras and the thing streams live to tape, it's like really easy. We went in with multiple cameras and lights and sat down and filmed it, and then sat in an editing bay for like 7 hours all night to edit the first episode.
Ben and I would walk out. Like Alex would leave when he was finished because he was like, "Look, I'm letting you guys use my space, my equipment, and I've helped you on the show. It's awesome. Editing's on you guys." So Ben and I had never edited before.
Yeah.
Really, and so we would.
18 hours later.
Oh my God, we would leave there at like 5 in the morning. And by
Yeah.
the time we would post our after show, it wasn't relevant news anymore.
Yeah, so it was funny. It definitely was like
It was
an
fun.
interesting first run at it, and then obviously years later we do this Magic podcast. We're
Very
here.
successful Magic podcast.
Yeah, so that's the deal. That's the story, guys. Anyway, welcome to the show. We're talking Guardians of the Galaxy. So a couple things. First of all, we're on the Popcorn Talk Network, the online broadcast network dedicated to talking movies, all things movie related, and pop culture. Big pop culture, all things pop culture. So we had a policy on this show on Action Movie Anatomy for a long time.
Yeah, I was trying to like talk my way around it today.
Yeah. We used to say that we wouldn't cover superhero films. So, guys, when we started Action Movie Anatomy 2 years ago...
We were dumb. We were young.
The idea was that we didn't want to bring in franchises that had a lot of, like, preconceived IP, that people could watch them and be like, oh, I know all about Batman, so I know where this story's going. Like, we didn't want that to be the thing, so...
Yeah, and we also didn't want to put out content that a million other people were covering every single week.
And superhero stuff is very common. It's heavily covered. It's a saturated market right now. What we found after 100 episodes of AMA is that most of our favorite movies in the genre, outside of the superhero genre, we've now covered. There's a handful
lot of
left
them, yeah.
that we like, but we felt that at this point we have the audience, you guys that watch and listen and love the show, and you probably really like those movies just like we really like those movies. We don't need to pander and appeal to an audience that has no idea who we are anymore. We have an audience.
Yeah.
You guys want to hear us talk about movies that are awesome, and Guardians of the Galaxy is fucking awesome. So that's the deal.
It's a good thing that I can swear now.
Oh yeah, we can't swear.
Yeah,
on
we
the
can
show.
definitely
Cool.
swear on the
That's great.
show,
All
and we're past 100 episodes. So
Yeah.
it's like we're at episode 101. What a great way to start! Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Other than to start with a superhero movie.
We figured episodes 101 through 200, we would open up the playing field a little bit more. We would allow ourselves to cover movies that I mean, let's be honest, guys. The modern day action movie is the superhero movie. That's what happened. It changed.
I mean, if you look at Captain America, especially the Captain America movies, they're basically, spy versus spy thriller movies that, like, we've transcended into now superhero movies are this plus another genre. And a lot of them are mostly action movies.
Absolutely. And so that felt fair for us to get into. And Guardians is a very special and a very important one within this genre. So we felt that it was a good one to kick off. It's one of your favorite movies of all time, right, Kessler?
Oh, yeah. I mean,
I think it's
never
pretty
evident seen it.
Dressed up like a goddamn moron.
Haven't had an Infinity Stone.
Wearing a dress?
Yeah. Do you have a problem with that? I also have a romp him at home. And
He's got a gun, too. So.
Yeah, he's got a gun. So, we're here to cover Guardians. The movies we cover on the show adhere to 4 basic rules. So this is where I think probably it gets murky, because the rules are supposed to be for the old genre. And they are: rule number 1, the hero always plays by their own rules. Definitely Star-Lord plays by his own rules. No question.
100%.
Yeah, he's a Han Solo type of character. Rule number 2, the hero and the villain are always the smartest people, beings, things, aliens, dinosaurs, what have you in the room. I mean, he's not the smartest guy in the room, but there's a team. It's not really just a movie about him. So, like, the smartest guy in the room on the Guardians is, like,
he like,
Rocket, I guess?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean,
or Gamora, like she's
she's
smartest in a warrior perspective, and he's smartest in, like, he can reprogram any computer into becoming a gun.
Yeah, but we always talk about this on our show of like the classic Lethal Weapons. There's the nice guys. There's these combos of characters, and that's what's so great about the Guardians of the Galaxy is that they've gotten these 4 radical personalities.
Yep.
And put them into one great hero.
Totally.
So five.
I think rule number 2, we can pretty fiercely agree. It's just like not. It's a whole different thing. It's the team. It's just like a team dynamic.
Sure, but, like, I mean, he's the smartest guy in the room in the sense that he'll always luck out and survive and get to the end and have the right answer. I mean, like, he answers the end of the movie with something ridiculous and really dumb, but it totally works. So
the dancing and the singing. Rule number 3, the movie is driven by a police, military, political, or mercenary figure. Again,
he's a mercenary.
He's a mercenary.
He is a mercenary.
Yeah, the Ravagers are mercenaries.
100%.
Strong point. And rule number 4, the movie contains a minimum of 1 explosion. Every Marvel movie ever will contain a minimum of 1 explosion. It's like impossible not to. So yeah, that's the deal. That's the rules of the show. I suggest we move straight into the trailer for the film, and then we'll get into the thesis statement after that. What do you guys think?
It sounds good.
Yeah.
Hey, cool, man. No problem. No problem at all.
Who are you?
Star-Lord.
Who?
Well, Star-Lord, man. Legendary outlaw. Forget it.
We arrested these 5 on Xandar. Check out the rap.
So sweet that John C. Reilly's in this movie.
Yeah, he's great.
Ghai the Destroyer. Since his wife and family were killed, he's been on a rampage across the galaxy in his search for vengeance. Gamora, soldier, assassin, wanted on over a dozen counts of murder. Rocket, wanted on over 50 charges of vehicular theft and escape from lockup.
I just said for time's sake, it'd be better to do 3 instead of 5.
He's been traveling recently as Rocket's personal houseplant / muscle. Peter Jason Quill. He's also known as Star-Lord.
Who calls him that?
Himself, mostly. He's wanted largely on charges of minor assault, public intoxication, and fraud.
Oh, I'm sorry. I
seems much
didn't
more
know how
extended
this
in the
machine
trailer than
worked.
the movie.
There's a lot of stuff in the trailer that's not in the movie,
Yeah.
too. They were saying, yeah.
Hey. That's
This song is the first favorite song I ever had.
Really?
Yeah, my mom
So
really
good.
liked the Reservoir Dogs soundtrack,
Take those
and it
headphones
was
off
like,
right
I have a distinct memory.
Like the topless scene of Gamora's not in the movie.
Yeah, where would that have fit in the movie?
They call themselves the Guardians of the Galaxy.
What a bunch of a-holes.
Hooked on a feeling, I'm high on believing that you're in love with me. I'm hooked on a feeling.
So where
just-
would the Gamora scene have come? Like what?
It wouldn't have come. It would have been like someone creepily walking in on her changing.
Like maybe in the prison, like or something. Like she's changing in outfits.
Yeah,
They
that,
show-
that would be probably where it is.
Right?
Is when they're like,
Yeah, I guess.
when they try and murder her. That could have been a different part where they're all, because remember, they're like, she's in the prison, and then
Right.
they're like, Drax shows up, and that's when Drax joins the group, and
Yeah.
there's the guy who has his favorite knife taken.
Yep. Fair. All right, guys. So we are going to move into the next part of the show, guys. And if you watch it or listen, you know how this works. We come up with a bold thought, something almost rooted in hyperbole, a big idea that ties into this film, something you could kind of like defend at a party. Should be big. Should never be this is my favorite this or whatever. It should really be the greatest this, the only this, the first this, X, Y, and Z, something like that. And I think we should just get straight into it. So Alex Kessler is the guest of the show. Do you want to start this one out?
Yeah, sure. So my thesis statement is that James Gunn uses... this is the best example of a movie using music as a actual character in movie history.
Haha, it's funny you say it that way.
Yep. I wish you would not have said character because I would have agreed with you. But since you said character, I have to disagree.
And I know what you're going to disagree
I
with.
know exactly what you're.
I think you're close to being exactly correct, but then again, it's your thesis, so you can defend the shit out of it.
absolutely.
It's on you to defend it.
So weird that swearing is allowed on camera.
Yeah, it's great, right? Okay, so the thing that I think is, yeah, right, just get it out. The thing that I think is so true about your statement is that the music in this film is one of the most impactful uses of music in a film ever.
Yeah.
In my opinion. Why do you use the word character?
I use character because it has an emotional arc through the movie. It causes emotional characters to... It causes other characters to react and have growth. And on top of that, there are multiple moments where the music was saved as if it was a character. Like his actual... The album he's listening to, the movie,
Walkman,
yeah.
the Walkman, he almost risks his entire life just to get that Walkman and the music back. And then the biggest, most emotional, probably second most emotional reveal in the movie is at the end when he gets the second tape. And there's an entire other 12 songs that my mother came to me. And you could maybe argue that the music is actually his mother.
Yeah.
And that's really what the character is. But I would say then that this is the best time someone has personified a character using music.
It's like a really good point you made.
It is a really good point.
Because the one that we would argue is music in a scene. It's a specific scene's use of music.
Yeah.
As opposed to...
Well, I mean, it might even be throughout the whole movie
Yeah.
as well. I definitely think so. But I will give you that embodying the character in the Walkman makes it a genius point.
Yeah, it definitely does.
And I completely agree with you now, 100%. I think that the
was
use,
easy.
yeah, no, it's a good point because the fact that you actually make it into a character by using it as a Walkman, and if you go and you watch the second one, you see how important this item is to Star-Lord.
Right.
You do realize that it's not about just the music. It's about his mother and all that. But yeah, I think the fact that there's actual physical thing on film that we all feel attached to throughout both movies. That's a great point.
Yeah, because I
really
think
like that.
I think that the idea that the way they set it up...
Get off my show!
The way they set it up where the Walkman exists early, and then the fact that he has to go back to get the Walkman makes you feel like, okay, if he doesn't get the Walkman, the good vibes we're getting from this movie, the way this movie's going is going to change. So it's like, he has to get that Walkman, and if he doesn't get that Walkman, we don't get what this movie feels like. It goes off a cliff.
Yeah.
The movie opens with him looking at the Walkman,
Yeah.
and then his mom giving him the gift and then dying in front of him.
Pretty sad scene, too, that opening scene.
What's up?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Jonas Tiger just said Pulp Fiction and Goodfellas. You know, there's a lot of movies that have great uses of music, but again,
Yep.
I think using the word character is the most interesting point of that whole thing.
Yeah, because my original thesis that is similar to that was I was going to say this is the greatest use of commercial music in a genre film ever. Because I think, Kessler, you and I were having this conversation yesterday about, like, what about biopics then? How do you, if you just say movie, it's like, like, of course, the use of music in, like, Ray is more integral to Ray than the use of music in this movie because you literally can't make the movie without it.
Right, but Ray is the music.
Right.
He's the character.
Which is why I think genre is so important because, like, 70s pop songs in a sci-fi movie is like such like that's not what you would expect at all, and they make it work beautifully.
And you know, this kind of harks back because I was thinking about it afterwards, and Hooked on a Feeling is probably where I kind of made the connection. I would say Tarantino may, especially in his early films or the middle films, did a better job maybe than this movie of incorporating unheard of songs or incorporating into the movie than this did. But those weren't a character in that movie. That there wasn't like an emotional connection to what the music was doing throughout it, and so it's more just how every movie uses music, which is a different version of using it than what this is doing.
We should clarify, by the way, because Andrew and I just did not actually make specific reference to it. We were talking about Boogie Nights.
Oh yeah. We're just gonna let you guys wonder forever.
It's acknowledged that the drug deal gone bad scene in Boogie Nights is, I think collectively we agree, the greatest use of music in a scene ever.
Yeah, I think so, definitely,
and is incredible. And it's just go watch that movie. Fist Bump Films Weekly. We'll get to talk about that movie finally.
All we want to talk about.
Do something about that movie.
I'm gonna hop in with my thesis because I think it's an interesting one. I definitely think this is an interesting point. And I think a lot of people are not gonna like it, or maybe they'll agree. I think that this is the greatest use of an A-lister's voice in disguise. Bradley Cooper disguises his voice so well in this movie. He's such a distracting person in anything you see him in because he's Bradley Cooper.
Yep.
He's beautiful. He's got a very clean, charismatic look about him, and he sounds like Bradley Cooper in everything he does. It's like all these guys, Gosling, Pitt, they all have these things about
The
him.
voice, yeah.
The voice, the intonation, the rhythm in which you speak. Cooper changes everything, which I think is incredible. And I think that if I were to have heard, I hear him sometimes. It's impossible to completely lose yourself. But I think if I were to hear him throughout the film, I would not have enjoyed the film even close to as much. I'd be like, what are you doing in here? You don't belong in these movies, Brad. I'm sorry. But the fact that he comes in as this character, this like weak, not weak, but like the character that's like the world's
He's
against
emotionally
him.
weak.
He's emotionally
and
weak.
puts off a strong facade of anger asshole.
Anger asshole all the time because he's so hurt on the inside. But I just it's not Bradley Cooper to me, and I love that so much.
Yeah, it's true. And I mean, the fact, not only just is he an A-lister, but the fact that he's like a handsome leading man A-lister playing that character in disguise makes it even better.
I thought you were going to say Vin Diesel as Groot was the number one.
Well, the more I read and learn about that, by the way, just the more...
So crazy.
It's insane, yeah.
Because at first you're like... Vin Diesel as Groot, and you're like, really?
You really needed to hire Vin Diesel?
And then you're like, oh, he was on stilts? He's actually in the scenes? And then you're like, oh, he recorded the lines in 19 different languages so he could have authentic in all the different markets?
Says it over 1,000 times per language.
Yeah, I was like all right, I guess I'll give more credit. And then when you think about it, you're just like, yeah, I mean, he really does create a very memorable character.
The performance completely, I mean, we're going to talk about our favorite line in the movie eventually, and we're going to get to a little bit more of that, but he thoroughly, there's a reason he did it so many times, and it comes across. The work that they put into that character is pretty apparent.
And I think it's so cool that Vin specifically spoke about how this kind of brought him back from the dark side after Paul died, and how Groot's look on life and his nurturing aspect and outlook on life is it made him happy again. It made him love a character, and it brought him back to wanting to act again.
But back to your point that Bradley Cooper, moving beyond Vin Diesel's, is the best of this. I guess the one challenge that I have to that comes to mind is Mark Hamill's Joker.
Okay.
Where I didn't know until I became a person who was into looking at who played who in animated films that Mark Hamill was the Joker. And, beyond Guardians of the Galaxy, Star Wars, and the Batman animated series are obviously very, integral to my childhood and growing up. And the fact that I had
animated series is legendary.
Right.
Yeah, definitely.
So the fact that you don't know that that's Luke Skywalker who's the Joker through that entire experience is pretty impressive. Beyond that, I don't know if I disagree with you too much.
No, I like that. I think that's a really good point. My counter to that is that Mark Hamill's not an A-lister. He is Luke Skywalker. He's one of the greatest, most famous people of all time. Everyone knows who he is for the most part. That makes you an A-lister? Not really anymore, unfortunately.
Oh, totally.
But I do get what you're saying, and I think him as the Joker is incredible. But Mark Hamill and Bradley Cooper were never in the same stratosphere other than for even as Luke, it still wasn't the same type of thing. It wasn't okay, now that he was Luke Skywalker, he can be anything.
It is weird that his career, and I know, Alex,
I've always thought this, though, too, what you're about to say.
It's weird that his career was, if you think about compared to anybody now who's in 3 parts of, the biggest franchise, nobody's career ends after 3. And he basically has one other significant thing in his career that he's done that happened a decade later, basically, and but he's Luke Skywalker. How did Mark Hamill not have this massive career?
So there's reason. He's kind of the prime example of the typecasting where they and this happened a lot. And what happened was agents got better. It wasn't Mark. It wasn't the era. It was that,
I literally just thought
technology.
You said Asians got better.
Asians got better. Yeah,
I was like, I know we did.
But it's more that like they learned their lesson, and so you had a situation where they had Mark Hamill, and they're like, "Oh, you're Mark Hamill, and you're Star Wars," and directors were like, "Oh, we don't want to work with you," and a combination of PR companies learning how to use that in the correct way to sell the next movie and not make it distracting that they're in it, and agents getting better at making sure while Mark Hamill was in Star Wars that he was doing 6 indie darlings that same year, so that people are not, oh, that's Luke Skywalker,
Right.
it's, oh, that's Mark Hamill,
Mark
actor I
Hamill.
like in these 6 things.
Right.
And there's the factor he was young, and Mark Hamill probably got much better at acting between Empire and Batman than he did between Star Wars and Empire, and so that helped and hurt him.
Yeah, I think so. Bringing it back to your thesis in the first place, I think that the Cooper conversation is really interesting. It's hard to come up with. I mean, shit, you could literally have said Vin Diesel, and it would have been almost like the same thesis statement, because they're both like they're both such crazy.
I didn't know either of them were the voices
Before the movie at all.
even after I watched it the first time.
Before looking up and or seeing
and before
credits.
no idea.
You had the Vin Diesel's in that movie. Where was it?
I had the Bradley. Oh my God, Bradley Cooper's Rocket, and then I was like, wait, what? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Vin Diesel's. And then I was like, oh, I feel like a dumbass.
Yeah, it took me
Obviously,
until
he was in the movie.
It took me until doing all the research for the movie.
Yeah, today.
to actually acknowledge that what Vin Diesel had done in this movie was remarkable. It didn't occur to me that that wasn't just fully CGI and just like a couple of like samples, and they're like, oh, Vin Diesel gets to have a part in this movie.
Like 6 I am Groots and then walk down and walk in with pajama pants.
It like didn't occur to me that like that was actually like a big role that he took very seriously. And
I
like,
know. I was reading that he was on stilts. I was like, really, dude? And I was like, well. I was like, that's awesome. Like, I went through this full cycle in like 10 seconds.
And part of that is also like the sound of it works better if you're on, because the way like the room picks up and the way things react to it and the way the sound is recorded by other people's mics is because he's on stilts, so his voice is going to have a different weight to it if he's higher up than if he's just on the ground. It's why, and also just people's eye lines. That's like, as someone who has like had to do in Top Decking, we did 2 like one actor played twins of each other.
Oh, right.
And like we had to refilm a scene 6 times because we just were learning eye lines at that point, and just that part alone is a huge deal.
It's true. I mean, like after filming and all that, like seeing the technical side of all that shit, it is crazy. All right, I want you to jump in with your thesis because I have something here I want to talk about in the chat. So go ahead.
All right, guys. So my thesis, and it's one that I've talked about on the show here before, is that Guardians of the Galaxy is one of the 5 most important comic book films ever made. And I brought this up. We've had this conversation. I've had it with you. I've had it with you. I've had it with Twitter.
We have names, Ben.
Yeah.
Mine's a you and you're you.
Yeah, I'm you.
Star-Lord. And it is...
Call me Star-Lord, guys.
It is because, in essence, the reason that this is such an important film is that we're now in an era where the investment behind one of these movies, if you're going to do it properly, is hundreds of millions of dollars. Like several $100 million to make one, and then marketing... You're spending hundreds of millions, like 300 to 400 million to get this thing out there. So to put it behind a franchise as nondescript as the Guardians of the Galaxy, and again, I've talked about this as a kid. I read Guardians of the Galaxy comic books. I remember the Infinity Gauntlet. Like, I have the comics in my mom's basement, and they're... Yes, the very one. And
where the fuck did that come from?
And they're weird comics. They're not comics that I ever would have read and be like, oh yeah, Marvel's going to be able to make a successful movie off of this. Like, the risk behind making this movie and its potential to flop and completely turn the industry off of ever taking any property outside of like the big 7 or 8 was so great.
And nothing about this movie should have been good. Like
nothing.
Chris Pratt, not a famous person before this movie.
Gunn didn't even want to watch his audition.
Right.
He didn't even want him to audition.
Yeah. I know. He was 60 pounds heavier than he was when he made the movie. When he auditioned, like the fact that this movie happened.
Look, I've been 60 pounds heavier.
There's videos of it.
There's
talk
a
about,
show. It's called Gotham's Finest. So that to me is why this movie's so important. Now, you're not going to be able to convince me that All Time is more important than several of the others, and I do have a list here, and we all, I think, put a list together, but it is a remarkable feat that this movie was as good as it is and as important as it was, because like they're making a second Suicide Squad, guys. The first one sucked, and the only reason the first one even happened is because Guardians of the Galaxy was successful.
God, that movie was so bad.
I mean, part of that, I mean, it's not necessarily, that movie was going to happen either way. That wasn't because of Guardians, but what made that movie exceptionally like a cardinal sin against humanity was a combination of Deadpool and Guardians. Because like Guardians comes up and it's like, oh, this is what a fun movie is like. Because at that point they were making like a serious like it was like there was like 2 jokes. The first trailer had all the total jokes in the entire movie.
Right.
But then that trailer did well, after Deadpool a month before that did gangbusters well, and they're like, oh, we have to add jokes, reshoots, and have the trailer company edit the movie.
I know,
Go.
that's the worst decision ever. Anyway, so that's my thesis statement, is that Guardians of the Galaxy is one of the 5 most important comic book movies ever made. I think we should get into a discussion. You said you wanted to bring up the chat?
I can agree with that. Yeah, I just want to talk about something really quick. And a lot of people in the chat, are talking about Bautista in Spectre.
Yeah.
What do you guys think about that and the use of him and like him falling flat in that? And like, why do you think he was so flat in that, and then this, he's the star?
He's my favorite part of the entire
He's
franchise.
a lot of people's favorite part.
I would say he's probably the best part of Spectre, though. Also, not that movie is
movie
good.
was horrible.
It's bad. Like that's not an like it's.
Yeah. No,
We watched it intending to do it on the show, and then audibled into Casino Royale because Spectre was so bad.
Yeah. Casino Royale is great.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people say that he's okay. So I think I'll stand with that. He's
Yeah.
the best part of Spectre.
Yeah,
he's like
I
a
remember
classic-
so
yeah,
little
I just
about it.
Anything good about
Yeah,
it?
Right.
he Inspector, he's just like a big fighting thing on a train. Like
He's like an unkillable henchman in
Yeah.
like classic Bond vein in a
He's
movie that
fine.
tried doing that everywhere. He's fine. Yeah.
He didn't do anything wrong in his scene. He did effectively, I think, what most people would have expected he would have done in a movie, because it's
Right.
not like he was a star actor. He was
Right.
like a fighter, and he's so good in this movie, and in the second one especially, he's just hilarious. That he got it. He nailed it.
I think some of that's writing and directing.
Yeah,
and, like,
yeah,
when,
for
when it comes
sure.
down to it, like his characters, some of the funnier lines of the movie are given to him, and
Yeah.
that has a lot to do with his stone cold ability to just read lines straight,
Right.
while it's the most ridiculous things you probably hear, and that's a combination of all those pieces together.
Yeah, I think Spectre just as a movie sucks.
Yeah, I just want to touch on it real quick because everyone
Yeah.
was talking about it. So let's get into this conversation of our top 5 most important
Comic book movies.
comic book movies, which is it's not favorite, it's most important.
Yeah, it's
what
not
it
best,
did
it's
at
not
the time.
favorite.
So this is the way I think we should do this, because I know this conversation could spiral into a long 25-minute tangent.
I brought a knife.
For the entire episodes, yeah.
I think each of us should read our list, 5 through 1, defend it, and move on. And we will, and that way we're not talking over each other. And if we want to dissect it at the end of the 3, we can. But I think otherwise, we're just gonna have similar lists, I'm assuming. So, who would like to start? I'm happy to if you guys aren't ready.
If you brought up
yeah,
that
why
as
don't
your
you do it?
thesis. This is your thesis.
This is your moment.
Thanks, Andrew.
Do you want the
a
talking?
lovely-
Do you want the talking Infinity Gauntlet?
Yes. It's a lovely blouse, miss.
You can wear it.
Yeah, all right.
It's like those Hawk gloves.
Yeah.
It's a Comic-Con exclusive.
Pretty cool.
Look at that.
All right, so this feels really dirty and sexual. I'm taking this thing off.
All right, get into your top 5.
5 through 1. Here we go. Number 5, Iron Man. Number 4, Guardians of the Galaxy. Number 3, Avengers. Number 2, The Dark Knight. Number 1, controversial pick here, 1989 Batman.
That's
And
a good. I like that.
Here's my defense as I go through the list. I'll start with number 1, 89 Batman. As somebody who worked in the comic book industry for like 5 years as a teenager, I did a lot of research, and I even wrote treatment for a script at one point about like a family owning a comic book store. 4,500 comic book stores opened up between like 92 and 94. So the entire generation of people that went to see these movies that we're watching now, this tentpole generation of action movies, these basically huge comic book movies, they're all kids that grew up on the back of the popularization of comic books in the early 90s. The collectibles market of basically baseball cards and comic books came out of the success of 1989's Batman. You can go all the way back to Superman in 78, but that's kind of a different thing. We made a superhero movie for the first time, whereas Batman we made a superhero movie that spawned action figures and cartoons and comic books and a whole entire industry. Comic books skyrocketed because of that Batman movie. So even though the current generation of movies owes more, I think, to some of these other films, it's that one that really starts what we have now all these years later, almost 30 years later. The people that are in their 30s and 40s and taking their kids to see these movies that are making these billion-dollar movies.
I don't even think that's close to your most controversial pick on your top 5. It's on my top 5.
Number 2, Dark Knight, the most legitimate superhero or comic book film ever made that was popularized. I won an Oscar. I think everybody knows. We've talked about this movie endlessly. Dark Knight's amazing. It almost would be number 1. It's just that at this point, the point has been rehashed so many times, it's hard to put it over Batman 89. Avengers is the extended universe movie. That's the one that brings all of them together. I think Avengers is great. It's not one of my favorites. I don't go back to watch that movie, but what it did for the industry and where we're at now.
Do you think Avengers is more important than Civil War was?
Yes.
Yeah,
By a
just
wide margin.
because it's the first time they brought together.
It was
even though
earlier.
It was done poorly.
Yeah,
I mean, most people would disagree with that statement.
People
but
love
beyond
Avengers,
that-
but yeah, look, it's just the importance for what we have now. I mean, all of these extended universes of Kong universe and the Dark universe, it's all owes to Avengers. That's where it all comes from. Number 4, Guardians of the Galaxy, for all the reasons I just said. I think you take a hodgepodge group of characters that nobody expected to be successful. The movie makes $700 million plus worldwide. The landscape for what you can do now in one of these movies is forever changed. It'll never be the same. And then number 5, Iron Man, for obvious reasons. It was the first one in the modern run of comic book movies. And I think more important than the other outlier choices like X-Men or like Spider-Man, the early successes Marvel had in this kind of, I guess, 2.0 era, if this is the 3.0 era, whatever. That's my 5. What do you guys got? Who wants to go second?
Go ahead, Kessler.
All right, so I have Batman '89 as my number 5. I do think it comic books before that point, and specifically comic book movies, were campy. Superman was good, it was great, but it was still campy. And I do think that movie does a whole lot of things right, specifically in how to do a Superman movie that's interesting. But Batman by Tim Burton was the first time we ever got a dark, serious, and in today's standards it's campy, but dark, serious comic book movie. It was taken seriously. Jack Nicholson, who was an amazing actor, was, frontline, and so that's one of the reasons I definitely think it's in the top 5 most influential. After that, I have actually Spider-Man 1, and I would separate that era of comic book movies and this current era's comic book movies. Partly because and the thing that people forget about Spider-Man 1 is it shattered every box office record.
Yeah, it was massive.
And like
two was incredibly successful.
And like before that, X-Men came out and Blade came out, and those were kind of the other 2 superhero movies of that era. And those were like the first ones to show like, oh, we can do a comic book movie, guys, and give it more than $50. Oh yeah, well, that was 80. That was like 92.
No, we're talking about Tom Jane one.
Yeah.
Great.
The 92. Yeah,
great one.
Or early 90s. But Spider-Man showed the world like, oh no, not only are comic book movies like good, but they're also a definitive venture that people started investing.
Like, you guys liked X-Men, Spider-Man's gonna break the records.
Yeah. And my phone died, so I can't read the rest of my list. But I know that also I have Superman on this list.
Oh, you put Superman 1.
Yeah. Kind of the similar. It's more. It's representative of the camp era to me, but it's the best of that camp era.
Yeah.
And I thought about putting Mask of Zorro because it's the first comic book movie ever. But when it really comes down to it, culturally significant. Like, Superman's people's favorite superhero around the world, even though he hasn't been in a good movie since that first Superman movie, as based on the back of that movie and comic books.
If you had put Mask of Zorro on your list, Andrew would have kissed you on the mouth, I'm pretty sure.
Anthony Hopkins.
Do you have, I'm assuming you have Avengers in your top 5 also?
Yeah, so I have Avengers now. And for me, Avengers created the cinematic universe. And there are a bunch of movies before that, and look at the Godzilla movies, where they cook other characters from other franchises and smush them together, Alien versus Predator. But this was the first time a studio had ever been like, you know what, we're going to plan this universe out. We're going to do 5 movies leading up to this, and it's going to culminate into this one movie. I also disagree on the quality of the movie. I think it's really good.
People like it.
I think it's a much more memorable movie than Civil War, and I do think it has the best villain in all of Marvel movies.
Who's the villain in that?
Loki.
Oh, right.
He's
Yeah,
good.
I don't like Loki.
And part of the reason for that is they do so much of this is a superhero that's the exact same as the hero that it's up against, and then they kill him.
I actually like Age of Ultron more, which I know is like criminal.
That's criminal.
I know people think that's insane, but I just think Loki's a bad villain. I think anytime you have a god against humans, it's just not.
What's a god against gods?
Well, a god against a god
and the Hulk
superheroes
who bashes his face in.
Yeah, he's not God though.
Yeah. And then, so that was your 2 or that was your 1?
That was 2, then Dark Knight.
Dark Knight, just
Okay. It proved a superhero movie was to be taken seriously. Like where Spider-Man proved that they were worth putting money into, but so did Independence Day and Transformers movies. Like at that point, movie that makes a lot of money wasn't necessarily critically acclaimed. Dark Knight is on most people's top 5 movies ever list. It won an Oscar. It's the only comic book movie that I know of that's won Oscars.
I think we ranked
excluding special effects stuff.
On our top 100 movies we've ever done on AMA. I want to say Dark Knight was like number 6, 5, 4, something like that. Right? It was super high. I know.
Yeah.
It's up there.
All right, so my number 5, I didn't know I was going to put them in a specific order because it's kind of tough for me to figure out which one's the most important to me. But I will say that number 5 is Iron Man, just for everything that you guys have said. I don't need to touch on it again. Number 4, I went with Logan, and the reason for that is I think it's come at a really important time with superhero movies where they're coming out at an insane rate on every platform, whether it's the CW, whether it's Netflix, whether it's online, whether it's in the theaters. Logan reminded you that you can do more, that you can change things, that you can still make a great fucking movie with superheroes in it. Not a great superhero movie.
Right.
And I think that that's what's getting lost in a lot of times. I think it's exactly what was lost in Suicide Squad, and I think that's what's lost in the whole Thor series. Like, you need to have this grip of reality, this thing that grounds you and makes it feel real. I mean, like...
Well, it's one of the reasons Winter Soldier was so good, is that it
Yeah.
did a similar, not to the same extent, but it had a realism about it that was more like, oh, this is just a movie that happens to have superhero movie in it, not the reverse.
Yeah.
And it's just a great film. I don't know any other superhero movie that really made me cry that way, although Guardians is very good. Three, I'll say Guardians is because of exactly what you guys have said. Again, it was kind of like, look, you can do anything now. People are in. We are all in. We love this. Number 2, I went with Batman Begins. And the reason for that is that I think the Superman movies are important. I think Tim Burton Batmans are important. We were going to get superhero movies again no matter what.
True.
That was going to happen. As who we were as a society and as an audience, especially with comic books on the rise, we were going to get superheroes movies no matter what, which is why I don't think the Avengers is important. Like, it was all going to happen. I know that's, yes. But my point behind that is that Batman Begins came out, and a great director, well, now a great director, at the time we were on the fence about him, but it was like, look, we can make, it was the same thing that Tim Burton did back in the 80s, but we're doing it again in a much harder time to make people believe you. Things are much darker now. As an audience, we want darker, more real things, and this was the first time a superhero movie came out in a long time where we saw it and we were like, holy shit.
Yeah.
What can happen now?
It brought realism to comic book movies.
Exactly. And everything else has been great, but we wanted realism. And then my number 1's The Dark Knight. It's just because it's the greatest. And at that time, again, with what we're talking about, it was bringing that more can be done in these movies. You can make an Academy Award-winning comic book movie.
I mean, like,
you can do it.
Let's just be honest, guys. They increased the number of Best Picture nominations the next year because
Just
The Dark
for
Knight
The
was
Dark
so
Knight.
good.
Right.
Like, that's the proof that you need. Everybody was like, yeah, we should have. We missed it. This movie should have been nominated for Best Picture. So I think, it sounds like we all have a pretty strong agreement. You've convinced me, like, heavily on Batman Begins since starting this show.
I've argued that point since day one.
Yeah.
But I think it's the most important movie in the whole trilogy.
I love Batman Begins. I still do love Dark Knight more, but I think I give the movie a lot more respect and credit now than I did in the beginning. Did we do it on the show?
We did not. And I actually think when I go back and watch them, I enjoy watching... I think Begins is a better film than Dark Knight, even though I think that Dark Knight is more enjoyable to watch for the first half. Does that make sense?
The Dark Knight, if you take Heath Ledger's Joker out of it, which you can't do, like, it's inherent to it, but if you take it, The Dark Knight is kind of an okay movie.
Yeah,
like, the logic of what's going on, and things are happening, and the whole gang stuff is going on, and you're like, whatever, versus Batman Begins, which I think is, like, a pretty solid, like, it's just a solid movie.
Agreed. Yeah, I think we all can agree.
It's a movie I'd build a house on, where The Dark Knight is the movie I'd go on vacation.
And Dark Knight has like the 3 or 4 sequences that are just like breathtaking, which the Batman Begins doesn't have. It doesn't have the equivalent of him jumping off the building, or just like the Ledger bank, like the bank robbery at the beginning of Dark Knight is like the most
one of the best scenes ever.
Yeah, that bank robbery is amazing.
All right, guys, fine. My number 1's Punisher. The audience is calling it out.
So
They're like, what are you
disappointed.
doing? They're like, yeah, Punisher's close, though.
All right, guys, that's going to wrap up our top 5 most important comic book movies all time. We're going to get into the next part of the show, and this is Fist Pump Moment. It's that moment in the movie something happens. You look around and like, are you seeing this right now? This is so fucking sweet. I'm so excited to watch the rest of this. Yeah. This movie is like a just giant walking fist pump.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and I think both of them are. I think that's
Yeah.
what's so great about the Guardians of the Galaxy. So I'm going to hop in first because mine is the title screen. It's the opening. It's when the song comes on. Mercy, you still have it queued up? Is it still there? If you don't, it's okay. But he's walking and you're like, oh my God, it's Chris Pratt. And he does this like weird dance with his arms up, and the titles come up, and you're like, yes.
Yeah.
This is the beginning?
Yep.
This is the intro?
Yep.
I get to watch 2 more out. Fuck yes. I am all in.
It's fun space.
Yeah.
Which is like something we haven't had in a long time at that point. So it's
Yeah.
like, oh, they're going to do it. Great. This is the Star Wars movie I wanted 5 years ago.
And it's also like, look at all these people that are kind of A-listers, but they're kind of nobodies at the time. You know what I mean? Like, except for Bradley Cooper.
Well, the
like,
only A-listers, you don't see them in the movie. You didn't know they were in it until you looked it up a week later.
Yeah, like we had a conversation about how Zoe Saldana was actually a major A-lister at this point, but she has such a weird career.
Yeah, she's got one of the. Well, we'll get into that.
Yeah, we'll get into that. But
Fist
anyway, so that is my fist pump. It's the credits, it's the dancing, it's the music, and you're just like, this is this type of movie.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yep. It's fun. What do you got?
Fist bump moment. Mine's going to be the whole prison scene. This is the first time we actually get all 5 Guardians together, working together, and it starts with the whole rant of Rocket telling people what they need to do, and Chris Pratt, you get the leg, and make sure the last thing we do is to get the battery. And this entire time you see Groot like reaching for it and then ripping out the wall, and then that just escalates into the best scenes with Drax, where he's talking about things going over his head or not going over his head. Sorry, Drax.
So good.
And it's also like you get the 2 best Groot and Rocket battle scenes, I think, where it's like Groot, it's the first time you get like, I am Groot, and he's like taller than everything, and then Rocket climbs on and steals the gun from the guy, and it's like,
and you get the sweet Michael Bay 360 shot.
Is so that prison scene might be the best thing in the whole 2 movies. It's so good, and they used the walking down the hallways slowly in the Guardians franchise better than any other franchise ever.
I think my personal fist pump moment is at the end of that scene. It's the first time you see the whole team together standing in the like little control tower thing. When the door opens and they're all standing there, and you're like, this is being a little kid, and this is the cover of the comic book. And this is what it is. And they took that and they put it in a scene, and it's just awesome. It's just great. Like it's like 25 or so minutes, 30 minutes into the movie at that point, I think, and you're just like, I'm in. I'm so in. You guys have made me love these characters, all of it. And they built everything. You're like, okay, the maybe romance between Gamora and Star-Lord that's going to happen at some point.
Only Marvel movie without a kiss ever.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, and I want to speak on that point with that picture.
Ever?
Yeah, I just
Who
read that today.
kisses in Avengers?
Does Black Widow kiss someone in there? Someone kisses in there.
No, it's not. It's Gwyneth Paltrow.
And
She's like, I forget she's like in that movie because they've deleted her from the franchise.
She's gone now, right?
Yeah, she's not.
Oh, she is?
She's not coming back.
I love Gwyneth.
Part of that I think is they're moving because like they realize that Tony Stark is a better character when he's in other people's movies than his own necessarily, and they're like, we'd rather use your contract to show up in the Spider-Man movie and the Avengers, and you're gonna die because your contract you're costing us $250 million for
shitload of money.
Avengers Infinity War.
One thing I want to say about your moment there is, and I know Zack Snyder's going through a really hard time right now, and I my condolences to his family. But that moment is what Zack Snyder wants to do in his films.
Yeah.
That moment, because we always talk about how he's so good at painting a picture without giving you the story behind it to give you that feeling that you get. He always paints the picture without doing the work to get you there.
He's a great painter.
He's just like, here's the painting.
Yeah.
What's it about? I don't fucking know, but it looks great.
Well, we talked about this the other day. Him and Michael Bay are both they're music video directors.
Yeah, exactly.
Like he is very good at printing a very, very pretty picture, but what James Gunn, I'm gonna say Tim Gunn at least once.
I always think I'm like Tim Gunn's directing Guardians of the Galaxy.
What James Gunn is amazing at is making you love every one of his characters and giving them a unique moment. One of the things I loved about the second one is I didn't really care about Star-Lord's storyline. That's probably the weakest part of that, but all of the other character arcs are so much better. The moments that you get where like, you really see like, oh, Rocket seems like a badass, but then you're like, oh, and your stupid triangle face, and then the camera pans, but you still see him in the background get like really sad, and he's like, oh, my face, it's triangle shaped. Is a trash panda worse or better than Raccoon? It's worse. It's so much worse.
So good.
But yeah, and that's what's important with the movie, and that's what's important with a great movie. You can have as many pretty things as possible, and we're now at the point where you can make anything you want.
Yeah.
But making you care about those things is what's the difficult part, and these movies are great at doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to star profiles. We're going to talk a little bit about the stars of the film, the major 2 stars of the film, Chris Pratt and Zoe Saldana, the kind of leads, as it were, I guess, male and female. Let's start with Pratt. So, what a bizarre career Chris Pratt's had in the last few years.
Yeah.
Just like, not bizarre. I mean, I guess he's in the meteoric rise to fame that we talk about, that you see at Travolta in the late 70s.
He was written as a guest star on a show that might not be successful on TV.
Yeah, and he was a comic relief, too.
Yeah, but he wasn't even.
He was in Everwood.
Oh, that's true. He was in Everwood. Excuse
the CW
me.
drama about a doctor moving to the Northwest.
He was also in another TV show, wasn't he? Was he in that? I think it was something in between those two. Anyway, my point is that like he wasn't even supposed to be on that show,
right?
For more than like an episode or two, but they liked him so much he kept coming back.
Yeah,
that's like the story of Chris Pratt's life. is you're not even supposed to be here, but we like you so much.
Right.
You're like really likable.
He's
and
supposed
we want to keep working with you.
He's also like just awesome. Like if you read about him personally and like the way that he handles himself in real life, it's just he's the coolest. I like absolutely love Chris Pratt. So, but yeah, the stuff that he's got on his docket before this, Her in 2013, Delivery Man in 2013, and the Lego Movie in 2014. Now, the big relevant Chris Pratt roles that happened before this, the movies that people remember other than Lego Movie, are Zero Dark 30. That he's got a part in, not a huge part, but a part in, and that's a big Oscar movie. And then he also is in Moneyball, which is the other big movie that he's got a pretty big part in.
You drastically forgot Jurassic World.
No, that's after this. It's after.
Oh, you're saying it timeline-wise.
Prior to this
prior
movie.
to the movie.
Yeah, so Moneyball's the one where he got like a pretty significant character. He's like an important piece of that movie. That movie was nominated for Best Picture. A lot of people saw it. And he's kind of a lovable underdog in that movie who doesn't believe in himself. And it's really just 2012 to 2014 is where the world was like, oh yeah, this Chris Pratt guy. Sure, we'll put him in movies. And then it's like flash forward 3 years and it's like, oh, that Chris Pratt guy. He's like, top 3, top 5 stars in the world right now.
And I do think some of that comes on the back of Parks and Rec, because Parks and Rec had a similar kind of era of becoming good, because when it first came out, it was when we were kind of inundated with faux documentary shows. The Office was just starting to tail down, and so it was like, oh, do we want another one of these? Drop the mask.
30 Rock was like
coming around, but then we started realizing Amy Poehler was great, and and then if you look at pretty much the entire cast of that show, Aubrey Plaza is also doing really well. Aziz Ansari is obviously doing really well.
Their whole cast exploded.
And Offerman. The big difference is that of them, Chris Pratt was also the one that got really, really hot halfway through his career. He went from dopey dude to, we talk about the number one shirtless scene in a movie, and Brad Pitt is it, but this one's close when he's covered on the orange
Jack
stuff.
Pratt.
Yeah, because it's the first time I was like, wait.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's because the transformation. You know how hard it is to do that.
Was he just a genius savant where he was like, all right, guys, here's the plan.
I'm going
to be fat for the first 10 years of my career. I'll be in a bunch of movies. I'll be chubby. I'll be funny. I'll post pictures like this. And, that's the picture that everybody always shows. Yeah. And then, I'll just get jacked for a movie and the world will be like, oh, I like this guy. He's funny. Yeah. Oh, wait, he's jacked too? He's a star.
Why not?
Yeah.
That could be exactly what he did.
That's what Andrew Guy's been doing since Gotham's Finest. I've been planning this for years.
It's what Tom Hanks did. Tom Hanks was the goofy, lovable guy, but then he also ended up being really good. And less to extent of Harrison Ford, but that's there's a likability factor that comes with this leading man that the world wants that he embodies in a really, really important way.
Yeah, we always call that a superstar charisma.
Yeah.
Leading man charisma, and he's got whatever that it factor is. However, I do want to get in the conversation about Chris Pratt and him being overrated, underrated, or properly rated. This guy has got the world at his feet, but he does movies like Passengers, and he's in that point now. He's at that Sam Worthington phase in the mid-2000s. He's at that Christian Bale phase in the late 2008, 2009 period. Yeah. Is he oversaturating himself? Do you want more of him? Is he already getting too much? Is he not getting enough?
Are we seeing?
What do you guys think about Chris Pratt?
Yeah, it's that whole thing when you're watching the movies. You're like, how much more does this guy have to offer? Before I'm just I'm tired of watching Chris Pratt be Chris Pratt.
Right.
There's very few examples in history of those guys, those Harrison Fords, getting to just do the gimmick forever and nobody getting sick of it.
And that's why if I was him, I would look heavily at Tom Hanks's career. Because he, around this exact point, went into a little bit more, I need to do 1 or 2 real dramas and 1 or 2 comedies. Yeah. And Chris Pratt is kind of locked into his genre of high budget, high sci-fi, high concept, action movies. And Jurassic World was bad. Not Magnificent Seven.
I'm glad you feel that way.
Yeah, it's bad. Jurassic World was not a good movie.
I'm glad you feel that way.
We don't disagree on every movie. What was the not Magnificent Seven or Magnificent Seven? Yeah. Magnificent was not good.
It's okay, and he's sweet in it actually.
Yeah. But it's a mediocre Western movie.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Passengers was relatively derided.
I didn't watch it.
Nor did I.
The issue, I've seen fan edits, or I've seen reviews of fan edits more, and the fan edits do a better job with that movie than they did with it.
Well, it also has the whole problem, all of the controversy about the consent thing, which is that happened with that. You know about this?
No.
There's a scene in the movie where basically they get wasted and they sleep together. And
no, that's not. So that's not what the consent thing is.
Or she's wasted or something.
No. So he wakes her up without asking her, and it plays them off as the romance thing, but he kind of doomed her to die. That's like the plot of the movie, and that's what people had a problem with. So, like, spoilers.
Oh.
But the entire first of the movie makes him really endearing, and you want to like him, and then he makes the decision that's terrible to wake her up against her will, and then she's now doomed with him to just die together, and then she finds out, and then it's just like, oh, it's okay, we love each other, let's save the ship.
That's what it is. I thought there was a whole thing about like lack of consent, some sex thing that I read about.
It's not that it is lack of
what it
consent,
is.
but it's lack of consent.
Got it.
It's a more of an ethereal lack of consent than just a blatant full-on thing, and the fan edits that I've seen make him a villain. That's what they do. The way they make the movie good is they make it so that the answer was he shouldn't have done it and he gets punished for that, not that, oh, this is a good idea.
The fun fact about that movie, it's directed by Morton Tildum, who directed, I believe, unless I'm mistaken, The Theory of Everything? Or no, it was The Imitation Game. He directed one of the 2 Best Picture nominees from like 2015, and then he directed Passengers as his next movie. It was like,
Well, that movie was supposed to be huge.
Yeah,
It was supposed to be
huge.
like incredible.
Yeah,
It had 2 of the best actors at that time. It's a high sci-fi concept. Like, it's supposed. He probably was trying to like, I'm gonna make my 2001 Space Odyssey, and then it was like,
It's like, wah, wah.
Yeah, I know, that movie really came.
So how do you feel about him at the end of all this, Cass? How do you feel about?
I think
Pratt?
right now, if he continues as he is, he's overrated. Okay. I think if he can pull off either Jurassic World 2 is good, or 1 or 2 non-sci-fi movies that kind of help him, then he's going to be in a better position.
Yeah.
So what about right now? This
Overrated.
moment right now. Do you think he's over?
Overrated.
Gotcha.
Yeah. It's not a big overrating. I mean, I think he did a great job in Guardians of the Galaxy, but I also think he was probably the weakest part of 2.
He was.
Yeah, I do agree with that.
You can open it, and there's
What's going on in there?
there's yeah, you can blow up.
Stone.
You have to do the like
Immortal. So
the Benicio
sweet.
del Toro. Another great background shot of Rocket, because he also does it behind him when it's happening, and I didn't notice it until my rewatch last night, and I'm like, great use of background CGI character.
I love Benicio.
What do you think?
I think I agree. I think he's overrated, and my reasoning isn't exactly the same. I definitely agree with every point that Kessler's made, but my point, it comes from an acting stand of view.
Yeah.
I don't think Chris Pratt's a great actor. I think he's good. I think he's got great charisma. I think he's enjoyable, but in watching Guardians 2 and even in Guardians 1, a lot of times when he's got to get to his point of his mother being lost and his sadness, and this is like very technical for me, but it's like he's always angry, and I get it. Your mom died and someone, but like you can't play that one note as an actor through 2 movies. Even if that's the whole thing is like someone killed my mom, then he finds out something happened,
Right.
I'm trying not to spoil number 2 yet.
Yeah.
It hasn't been a month. You still can't do it.
Yeah, exactly. What were you going to
It's a
say?
month barrier. I kind of disagree. I mean, and this is partly, I live tweeted watching it last night when I rewatched it, and like the ending of this movie is like great. It's one of the reasons you
I
walk
think
away
that's
so
the
happy
best
with it.
moment in his whole career on film.
Like when he opens the tape and there's like tears in his eyes, and he has a few more moments than I think you give him credit for that. Some of them are very CGI'd, so it's hard to see, like when he's like sacrifices himself for Zoe Saldana, and in other movies I agree, like his most emotional stuff is in Guardians of the Galaxy, which I think is the issue, and that's why I say I think he needs to do a non-sci-fi movie like this, where it's not about how likable it is, but it's about some other facet of his acting.
See, I want to speak to what you just said and then respond to what you just said to what he just said, because I think it's interesting that like Chris Pratt's definitely in that moment right now where he's under the microscope, and I think that if he wasn't in that moment where he was under the microscope, you probably wouldn't have the opinion of he's not that good of an actor, because it wouldn't be like you need to give him that much credit. Like, to his credit, coming from Parks and Rec, being who he was to this point, I think we would be like, he's a pretty good actor, but it's like the world is like Chris Pratt, top star. So you're like, well, I hold him to a very high standard now.
I still think he's a top star. I think he's a good actor. I just don't think he's a great actor.
Right.
You know what I mean? I don't think that he can pull off those great dramatic things. I think he's like maybe Hugh Jackman at the beginning of his career.
See, I think when you get to the point that he's at now, it's almost like you're flying so close to the sun. The microscope gets so tight on you that this idea of like what it takes to be a great actor becomes it's like a much more high concept thing to people once you're that kind of a star, because it's like, well, you're making all this money. People have this association with you being this blue chip guy. The guys that I know that are blue chip like that are the Hugh Jackmans and the Christian Bales and these huge people that can do anything. They can win Oscars, they can lead franchises, and it's like the only reason that you even have that discussion is because he's so famous. And so I think my gut tells me that Chris Pratt's a good actor, but I agree with you, we haven't seen it from him yet. Like a really great moment. He hasn't done the drama yet. He hasn't made his...
It's in this movie or it's not anywhere else.
Yeah.
And this
Yeah,
is his
yeah,
first
yeah.
movie kind of coming out.
And
as a
again,
big
that
person.
moment at the end when he's sitting there with the mixtape volume 2 is beautiful. But again, I think, I mean, you cut the scene, you put a couple eye drops in his eyes, you cut back, and you got movie magic. But I think the reason that scene's so great is because of the way it makes all of us feel.
Because the music is the best character
Yeah,
in the movie.
exactly. Because the music is the best character in the movie. But yeah, so my point is that he's overrated right now, and I think I stand firmly behind that because I just don't think that I just don't think he deserves everything he's getting in acting points.
I think Chris Pratt. I'm gonna go properly rated, barely. I'm gonna go into the middle and a little bit more, and I think he's one movie or 6 months to a year away from me agreeing with you guys completely. I think we will see what the next thing he's in that is not a comic book movie, and if it's like, did he make a decision at some point during this run to take a role or read a script and say, I want to do this, that was going to put him in that position? And that's what it really comes down to.
Yeah.
You can blame your agent, you can blame your manager. Bottom line, be a smart actor and make that decision at this point, because right now your stock is here and you need that. If you don't do that, you fall off a cliff.
Yeah, and let me say this about my point. I want Chris Pratt to succeed.
Yes,
I
totally.
want him to be a fantastic actor. I want to watch something that he does and be like, holy shit, I was so wrong, and I'm so happy to be wrong.
Well, just because the stuff you read about him, like, you know, stealing the outfit from sets, that he could go to children's hospitals and have them visited by
Yeah,
Star
when
Lord.
sick kids want to see Star-Lord. Like, that's why you do it.
He's
you
just
know?
and you watch him on red carpets. He's self-deprecating. He doesn't take himself that seriously. He's just awesome. He's awesome. He's a great star, and he's the kind of star that we want more of. And I hope that I hope he does get that movie, and I hope that he doesn't kind of fall off and become that.
I don't want the Sam Worthington effect to happen to Chris Pratt.
No,
It won't, because he's already so much better than Sam Worthington
Yeah.
is. But yeah,
I also think he's not overrated the way a lot of us he's not overrated, for instance, how Jennifer Lawrence is overrated.
Right.
Where like
dangerous
she was
territory.
really good in the few Oscar the
Yeah.
what's his face movies.
Winter's Bone?
Winter's
David
Bone,
O.
the David O. Russell movies. And she's probably the worst part of First Class. Probably she's decent in second in X-Men Days of Future Past.
Oh, sure.
I mean, everyone's bad in X-Men Apocalypse. Make Fassbender boring. I don't know what you can do to save that movie.
Yeah.
But she's probably overrated. Chris Pratt is not close to that level of overrated.
Yeah.
I think he's possibly overrated, or I think it's more that he's on the precipice of very soonly either being considered overrated or underrated, depending on what his next movie is.
Agreed. All right, let's
I looked up. It's Jurassic World and Avengers: Infinity War are the two next movies he's in.
Yeah.
And then it's Cowboy Ninja Samurai. Cowboy Ninja Viking and The Real McCoy. I don't know what that one is.
Well, hopefully. So, all right, let's quickly discuss Zoe Saldana, because we made reference to this a minute ago.
Yeah,
Zoe
she's-
Saldana, right? 3 of the biggest franchises of all time: Guardians, Star Trek, Avatar, and she's the star
of all of them, essentially.
all of them.
And she also starred in Columbiana. Like, she got her own action movie franchise that was gonna this. We were talking and we were watching the movie, and you're like, yeah, I mean, Bradley Cooper's an A-list, she's the most famous person really at the time.
The point this movie comes out, she's the 3rd major franchise.
Other than her and Bradley Cooper, who were actually they were dating right before this movie started.
That's right. They were in that movie, The Words, together.
She was the most famous person on set.
Yeah.
How about that?
Yeah, for
'Cause
sure.
Bradley Cooper wasn't in the movie until after they filmed it.
Yeah, that's a great point to put it. So she was the most famous person on set, but like, where are you, Zoe?
Is Zoe Saldana an A-lister? Straight up.
I would say no.
Right. How bizarre is that?
Right? You want to say
yeah.
she's high B.
Yeah, that's insane. So,
So
I mean,
the way to kind of way I establish A-listers is the middle America person who only sees 5 movies a year know her name?
Yeah,
and the
that's
answer
so
is no.
funny. I always do that.
yeah.
Like, well, if I ask, I work in the toy industry and I work with a bunch of people that live in, Arkansas, Ohio, and if I asked anyone who's Zoe Saldana, they'd be like,
That's fair.
No, I don't know.
The
And,
Midwest, the nexus of our country, the place that we
Yeah,
all use
seriously.
examples in media of what doesn't reach there.
and so, on the conversation of overrated, underrated, or well-rated, I think she's underrated. I
Yeah.
mean, the fact that she's good in these huge franchises but isn't being lauded as this A-list actress means something. She's being underrated. It has to be. That.
Yeah, I agree. She's underrated. Why?
Well, I think there's a couple things. I think it's.
She's not a very good actress. Sometimes.
Yeah, I
I'll say that.
I haven't seen like her actual dramatic roles. I haven't gone to find them, so I can't really speak on it. You know what I mean? But she also hasn't had a prominent one that we all are aware of. Like this movie Out of the Furnace that came out in 2013. That had a bunch of actors in it that I remember. That was Christian Bale and was it Casey Affleck is his brother in that movie? Woody Harrelson, right?
Yeah.
Like that was a drama. I didn't see it. I wonder if she's good in it. But I also think that Hollywood is extremely sexist, and that she is a woman of color. So like
That that's
There's a big barrier.
That's
in front
basically
of her.
what we got down to in our discussion is like, that's why.
She
You
wasn't-
are incredibly beautiful. You
Yeah.
are incredibly famous and successful. You are an A-lister. Like, by definition, even though I agree with the point
Yeah.
of like, no, I go, Mom, do you know who Zoe Saldana is? She goes, I know.
She
I
has
get
the
that.
pedigree of it.
For sure. She walks in anywhere in LA and everyone loses their shit.
and you don't
in most
book
places
those
in the world.
movies. Like, bottom line, talent, no talent. You don't book those movies unless you're talented, because those people that are booking you, the James Camerons of the world, they can tell. They know if you're good or not.
Totally. And like, she didn't have the Mark Hamill and Leonard Nimoy effect of like, are you a Na'vi? No. Oh no, you're in Star Trek. Oh
Yeah.
no, you are now the Guardians of the Galaxy girl. Like, it is so hard to do that.
Yep.
You know, so
I mean, she has more big franchises than Chris Pratt does.
She's got more big franchises than almost anybody. I mean,
so
recent
why?
ones.
Why?
I think part of it is, I mean, like on the woman angle, it's how many women really get picked to be the only one that can lead big franchises.
And on top of
and
that,
it's like
she's-
it's low, which is messed up.
And she's young and she's sexy, which is like you get typecast. Like the kind of success she's had.
Jolie got it in a different way, but she's also white.
Yeah, you have to have that one thing that elevates you. Otherwise, it's very difficult for the world to see. So anyway, let's move into the production development on the movie. Who made this movie? So first and foremost, this is really interesting. James Gunn. For those of you that don't know, James Gunn is like indie hero. He's like a guy who was a musician. He had a band. He made indie movies. He wrote them. He wrote the script for Scooby-Doo 1 and 2. He wrote the script for Dawn of the Dead, the 2004 one. He became like the first director ever to have back-to-back top movies at the box office. The first writer ever to do that with Scooby-Doo 2, I think, and Dawn of the Dead. And then
I love that movie.
Yeah, this is a sweet movie.
Yeah, Dawn of the Dead's like one of the more underrated. It's like kind of what brought zombies back.
Yeah.
Do you know who directed Dawn of the Dead?
I did know this, and I'm forgetting.
It's Zack Snyder. When Zack
Oh,
Snyder
yeah.
was like not doing the Zack Snyder thing, he was doing that. He did that, and then he did 300. And Kessler just dropping
Kessler
all
just
of his
lost
things.
his outline.
Yep. Well, I'm just gonna let you guys
We'll
get me
share.
there.
We'll share.
So then Gunn makes this movie called Super. If you guys remember that movie with Ellen
Yeah.
Page and Rainn Wilson, I think I saw it on TV once, maybe.
It's on Netflix. I
Yeah.
watched it after seeing Guardians of the Galaxy.
And it's charming and fun, and that was what he had done, though, is the crazy thing. That was the biggest movie he had done up to this point. So people were like, James Gunn, indie hero, do this movie Guardians of the Galaxy. And it was written originally, the original script was written by Nicole Perlman, who was in
Yeah.
the Marvel screenwriting program.
She's known as the only woman to ever pen a Marvel script.
Yeah, which is crazy.
Yeah.
And she wrote the first draft of the script, and when she was in the screenwriting program at Marvel, they were like, here's the list of franchises you can work on. And she was like, I'll pick Guardians. I'm like, really? She's like, yeah, it sounds interesting to me. That sounds fun. So she wrote it, and then James Gunn came on and revised the script with her. Voila, here we go. They write the movie together, and this is a huge hit. So like that's her first script, and now she's attached to like 7 other Marvel properties, including Captain Marvel with Brie Larson.
Yeah.
I mean, this is something I've been thinking. I mean, partly through this episode, now that we're kind of going through it, and especially when we went through the music and everything else, I think James Gunn has the potential to be the next Quentin Tarantino. Like, Quentin Tarantino was the first person to really have a really good relationship between characters, music, and plot, and interesting ways of kind of developing that plot in a large cast. I mean, if you look at Guardians of the Galaxy, it's really comparable to Reservoir Dogs, up to including the scene walking down the hallway
Yeah,
together to the
true.
good music.
I completely agree with that because there's something about what he does in this film, and you and I spoke on this right after we finished watching the first movie because it was actually the first time you'd watched the first movie in its entirety.
Spoiler, I had seen
which I
about
forgot.
half this movie, but I had
Yeah.
never watched it all the way through.
Which I thought was crazy. That
I don't know how we're friends.
Yeah, right? It's crazy.
Taking this back from you.
He does everything perfectly, but you don't know what it is. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
You can't exactly place your finger on why this film succeeds in every way because the characters aren't perfect. The music is perfect, but like, there's just something about it. Like, because even in the beginning when we talk about to go back to Zoe, I think a big part of why her character isn't so enjoyable is like the writing for her in the first movie is not that awesome,
Yeah, I don't give her
especially in the
much.
first half. But he does have that it factor that Tarantino had when he first came out, to where you're just mesmerized by his film because he creates this whole world, like this whole thing, and you're just in on it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I think part of it is like a combination of witty dialogue plus heart in that dialogue
Yeah.
that kind of gets across, and his attention to detail. Like, there are things that watching this movie now that I now remember from seeing Guardians 2, of like the troll doll that Peter Quill gives Yondu at the very end instead of this thing inside this rock,
yeah.
is like all over the second movie. And then the eyeball that Baby Groot gets in the second movie and brings them when she's trying to get all the different things for them is the eyeball that Rocket asks for at the end of this movie. He's like, get me that guy's eye. And he's like, which what?
One of my favorite parts is when they're all battling in the prison, and it just cuts to Star-Lord leaning on the wall. He's like, you want my what?
I just really need your leg.
I really need your leg. It's so good.
He's like, I didn't need it. Was he just hobbling around?
Oh yeah, I love when he brings it.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. I think there's a tremendous amount of talent here, and what I'm really hoping is that much in the way that we got after Begins and Dark Knight and all that Nolan's career really became this special thing as a special filmmaker, not just a comic book filmmaker. That's just where he got his stripes. I hope that we kind of get something similar out of James Gunn, where he gets to like leave the Guardians franchise after the third movie and do a couple original films with a big budget that are going to be awesome. Because I think he definitely has a vision that is special, and I'm excited to watch that. So aside from that stuff, basically he produced and wrote the Belko Experiment. That was that movie from this last year about the people in the building all trying to kill each other.
Oh yeah,
it looked really funny. I didn't see it.
Yeah,
it was like one of those, oh, I want to see that movie, and then my fiance was like, I don't want to see that movie. And I'm like, I guess I'm not going to see it.
Never did.
Totally. So that's pretty much that. Aside from that, the producer, the only one we're going to talk about is Kevin Feige. We've never gotten to talk about Kevin Feige on here because we hadn't done a modern day Marvel film.
Yeah.
He's the guy. If you know anything about the Marvel Comics universe, you know that Kevin Feige is he's the president of development with Marvel, I believe.
So he leads the Marvel cinematic, the Marvel studio.
President of production for Marvel.
Yeah. So you know, Ike Perlmutter is the president of Marvel.
Yeah.
And that's why, like, when you look at Avengers 2, that's why it was bad.
Right.
No, sorry.
No, I get it.
Was that, and that's also why Ant-Man had the problems it had, and why we didn't get the perfect Ant-Man movie, and we got what we got, which was fine. It was just a generic movie versus the Edgar Wright version of Ant-Man.
Yeah.
It's because Ike Perlmutter is this notoriously terrible person.
Got it.
Or it just is like very cheap and has these effects on things and was very nitpicky in what you couldn't and couldn't do. It's the reason that Marvel got really into like hating on the Fantastic Four and Fox stuff, because Fox had them and he was the kind of the person behind it.
Got it.
That's why Joss Whedon hates Marvel now betraying them for the Batman movies or DC universe.
So yeah, I mean, pretty much if you guys have followed at all the way this all went, we've talked a lot about Avi Arad with the original run because we've now covered Blade and we covered Punisher, and he's the guy. Avi Arad is effectively the same thing as Kevin Feige for that era of Marvel. He was like the guy that orchestrating all of it. Kevin Feige just seems to have a better grasp on what works, and now that the train is rolling, I mean, he gets the credits for the successes and the failures. They've just had a lot more successes than they had failures.
And he's the studio head.
Yep.
He's you know, not Jack Kirby, but he's the guy who ran Pixar, now runs Disney's animation.
Mike Ovitz? I don't know.
No. I mean, I know this. Okay, we'll skip over it.
Long story short, I mean, let's be honest, guys. The number of moving pieces and people involved in these movies with how much money they cost is just huge, ridiculous. He's the face. He's going to be successful with this being successful. The guy steering the ship until it's not, and then won't be anymore because that's the way this works. He's not directly responsible for all these movies. He's just the guy at the top when they're getting made.
It's like when you fire an offensive coordinator or a coach in football or in coaching.
The machine's
sports.
way too big for it to be Kevin Feige.
It's not just one person ever.
But the reason I would say that the reason Warner Brothers Cinematic Universe has not been successful is because they don't have a Kevin Feige and haven't had one.
He's steering the ship.
Like,
absolutely.
Yeah. Like, yes, if you know, you can hire a new captain for the ship and you can hire a talented one. There might be someone else other than him that could do this job. But because they have him and because he is as talented as he is, that's the reason Marvel exists.
I guess my point is he's the only listed producer we're going to talk about right now. I'll bet you if I was to look, Guardians of the Galaxy probably has like 13 producers, as they all do.
But he is listed as the exec pro.
And you would meet somebody at a bar and they would say, I produced Guardians of the Galaxy. And you'd be like, really? And you'd look them up and they'd be one of the 14 producers.
Right.
So that's the way these movies work. So anyway, let's talk a
Zoe
little
Saldana's 38.
Yeah, I think I knew that.
She's not young by Hollywood standards in any way.
Yeah, she broke onto the scene mid-30s.
Incredible. All right, so moving into Box Office Critical. Is that what we're doing now? All right. This was where everyone's minds were blown in the world. So Buena Vista produced this for $170 million. It was released in August, a late summer film. What were you guys thinking when you saw this trailer?
oh, I was like, that's interesting. They're making a Guardians of the Galaxy movie? I was like, crazy.
I was like, this looks fucking stupid. I'm not gonna watch that.
I had my favorite song of all time, I guess. So
Yeah.
I was like super hyped, and I'm already a Marvel fanboy at that point, so I'm gonna see every movie that they come out with.
I would have
I
said
knew I was going to watch it, even though I said that I wasn't going to.
yeah,
you know,
intrigued, curious. Those are the two words I would use. I wouldn't say I would have. I didn't walk out going, I'm gonna watch that. I think I walked out being like, oh wow, they're just making all the Marvel movies now.
I don't know, I was the guy telling everyone, like, guys, this movie's gonna be big, and like everyone's like, no, it's not. There's a dumb raccoon, and I'm like, no. First off, not a
raccoon, okay?
He's a trash panda. Second off, walking into this, there was like at Comic-Con before this movie came out, they had already announced that they had already greenlit the sequel. Wow. So 2 months before this movie was released, Marvel already kind of believed in this movie. And on top of that, fun space adventure where, like, basically at this point we'd been really deep in the fantasy world. We've gone through Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter, and then superhero movies, which are generally more fantasy than sci-fi, because they're like, oh, magic happened.
Yeah.
So getting a movie that's coming out that's supposed to be kind of the next kind of Star Wars-y like thing was something that I was super excited for.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I just wasn't, because I thought it looked ridiculous. I thought that the Marvel Universe was spinning out of control, and I was so pleasantly surprised.
I was sort of in the middle, but yeah, you were talking about how much money it made here.
So there you go, $333 million domestic and $440 worldwide for a grand total of $773 million. $750 million for a movie that no one had ever heard about.
And on
essentially.
top of that, it opened at 94. So let's throw this up. We have the worldwide graphic of the top 10 Marvel movies. We can blow up here and check that out. I think I actually threw top 15, but I really just want to look at the top 10. Guardians 2 now has made more money than this worldwide, which is insane.
But that's sequel.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Sequelnomics.
Yeah, no, agreed. But you can just see, like, I can't see actually because I'm blind. But there we go. So I mean, worldwide, those Spider-Man movies have still made more money. But yeah, you've got The Avengers, Age of Ultron, Iron Man 3, Civil War, Spider-Man 3, Spider-Man. Guardians 2 is now the 7th highest grossing Marvel movie that has been made so far.
It's been out for how long?
Yeah, like 2 weeks or 3 weeks. Spider-Man 2, Deadpool at 9th is crazy. $783 million worldwide.
That's the number one rated R movie of all time, right?
It's insane. And then Guardians of the Galaxy is number 10 with $773 million. So that's the era we live in. That's that's like half the highest grossing films of the last decade.
And this is comic book movies or
Marvel?
Just Marvel.
Yeah,
Just Marvel.
just
Okay.
Marvel.
I don't have my glasses, so I can't
Yeah.
read it.
So yeah, that's that's where this movie is, and the third movie will make even more money. Now, what's crazy to me is they're spending $1 billion to make Infinity War 1 and 2. $1 billion is what they're spending. So are they going to make $2 billion? Is that the plan? They're going to make $1 billion each? Is that the theory?
Well, even if you make, yes, but some of that's just they're aiming for. If they just do the 773 million number of Guardians, which the other Avengers movies beat, you're going to be making money.
Yeah.
Part of that also is
It does get to that point though. It's like you guys are literally only making movies to make money, and now you're not even making the type of money that you want to make anymore because your movies cost so much money.
Yeah, $1 billion to make 2 movies is like
It's insane.
The only reason we're even comfortable saying that out loud is because we've done this show for a year.
The great directors and producers are rolling over in their graves right now, being like, "You can't make a fucking good movie for $500 million."
A lot of that though is just actor paychecks. That's the
that,
big
for sure.
Robert Downey Jr. is making $250 million on those movies. That's a quarter of the budget we're talking about,
So
and
crazy.
half of one of those movies.
Which
is also why he's probably dying in those
$80
movies.
million more dollars than this movie cost just to pay Downey. So, moving on, this movie opened at number 1 at $94 million. No one saw that coming. Critically, I guess it's not in the top 250, or else I would have written that. I thought it was. It's at 8.1 on IMDb, which is incredible.
Yeah, really high.
It's got an audience score of 92 on Rotten Tomatoes, top critics 84, and all critics of 91.
92 is consistent with the way the best movies we do on the show. The audience score is always the highest.
It was nominated for 2 Oscars for makeup and visual effects, which I think is super cool that they went that way with Gamora and Drax, because they both wanted to do that. They thought it would be more authentic, and also it just looks better.
They look great.
Yeah, they look
both of them.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So I guess that brings us to our next segment, which there's so many good ones,
Yeah.
but our favorite line.
Yeah, favorite line, guys. So I'm gonna jump in first just because I am excited about this one. I didn't understand. So I read Drax the Destroyer, the comic book series from like the mid 2000s, I think is what it was. Annihilation. There was a whole event they did with Marvel. I read a lot of that stuff before this movie was even in production. And I remember Drax as a character. I had the comic book cards with him on. This was not at all the way I envisioned Drax in a movie, but I was so pleasantly surprised when watching his the whole idea that he doesn't understand sarcasm and that everything that he hears is taken literally is just hilarious. And Dave Bautista's perfect at it. So that line is perfectly embodied when they say it's over his head, and he's like, nothing goes over my head. My reflexes are too fast. I just like fell out of my chair laughing. It's like my favorite line in the whole movie.
Dying laughing at that. He's so fucking good. I have a lot of them actually. What you got, Kes?
I am Groot. I'm gonna take it.
Yeah, that's fair.
I mean, like, there are apps now that can change an entire website to every word just being "I am Groot." Like, it's one of the more classic things in this movie. It's the most quotable line from this movie, hands down, and it just I mean, maybe we are Groot from the emotional standpoint, but
it's a good moment.
Yeah,
we are Groot.
I have a lot of them. To add on Bautista, when he's like, "When did we establish that?" He's like 3 seconds ago. He's like, "I was not listening. I was thinking about something else." I was like, "That's me. That's like me in my life." The guy that Baby Groot kills, I think, in the second one, he goes. In the beginning, he's like, "Everyone's heard of that, right?" He's like, "Yeah, yeah." And he looks back at Rooker, and he's like, "No." And then he takes the knife, and he's like, "That was my favorite knife."
Yeah,
it's just like
great.
real subtle, great comedy. And then my little Star-Lord, the letter from the mom, was just really sweet.
Yeah,
really touching.
definitely.
And
Great
the fact
moment.
that that's where he got his stupid nickname that everyone can't remember is from his mom is awesome.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Something I just remember this talking about great lines. I was like, oh, is there a line? But there's not, because it's just a whistle. But a non-picked fist pump moment would have been when Yondu kills all those guys with the arrow. Like, the entire time they set it up, it's like this scary thing. You're like, whoa, why? And then at the end, he just murders like 30 guys. Just
anytime Yondu uses that thing, you're just like, Jesus, I could do anything with that.
I know, right?
And it's the prettiest scene in... And maybe the best scene in Guardians 2 is when him and Rocket kind of take
through
everyone
prison.
out.
Yeah, for sure.
And Baby Groot, sorry.
And Baby Groot,
Baby Groot just is the MVP of both movies, period. Like, no
Groot
question.
and Baby Groot. Yeah, Baby Groot at the end.
Baby Groot's just the best.
Yeah, I tweeted after watching it, filming it, and I'm like in bed, my room is dark, and I like zoom in on the TV, and I was like, this might be the best thing to ever think.
Yeah.
I know. I was visiting my family over Christmas, and my brother-in-law was finishing watching Guardians, and it was just the end, and I just saw Bautista and Baby Groot, and I was like, I need to go watch that movie. Like, it made me so happy just to see that.
Yeah, it's amazing. All right, guys, we are going to get into the last discussion here on Action Movie Anatomy. Which of the 3 action movie categories does this film fit into? There are 3. The first category is totally legitimate. Those are going to be movies like The Fugitive and Lone Survivor, which just hold together and they're dramatic and they don't fall apart. Inception, they're not silly. They're just legitimately intense movies. Then there are totally ridiculous movies like Con Air and Face Off.
Demolition Man, Running Man.
Yeah, they're silly. You really just laughed your way to the bank the whole time as you're watching it. And it's not the correct use of that phrase. And then the middle category is ridiculously legitimate. And that's like the combination of ridiculous and awesome. And it's usually driven by one really compelling element. You do laugh unintentionally here and there, but it's, Point Break and Predator and movies like that are in that middle category. So this one is intentionally funny, so it's a weird, but I'm gonna just jump in and say I think it's totally legit. It's like a perfect movie.
Yeah.
The silliness is real silliness. Like I went on vacation this weekend for Memorial Day weekend, and we were with a bunch of friends. I'm like, oh, people just regularly have dumb conversations that they're trying to rip on each other, and they're funny, and there's jokes. That's like a normal thing. So from a realistic perspective, that's fine. And then everything else in the movie is pretty like just standard sci-fi space adventure, which can be totally legitimate.
Yeah. I'm going to say that this movie's ridiculously legitimate, but it's not because I don't think it's legitimate. I think it's because of the way it makes me feel. I don't want it to be totally legit. I don't want it to be a movie that I talk about. I'm like, I put it in the same category as Lone Survivor because this movie is so much more fun. It's like such an experience to watch it that to give it a totally legitimate outlook is like, I don't want it to be totally legitimate.
Right, you want it to be in the
middle. I want
middle.
it to feel fantastical. I want to go into their world. I want my imagination to suspend a little bit.
You want it to be silly.
Yeah, I want it to be that way, and I think that they do it perfectly. I think this is maybe the most perfectly ridiculously legitimate movie we've ever done.
Yeah.
Well, I guess my point on the totally legitimate side is I wish we were more willing to accept movies like this as totally legitimate.
Right.
Like, the fact that Oscar bait is a concept and that only movies that fit into that, like, window are the things that we're willing to say, like, these deserve an Oscar. And, like, when something like Mad Max or Avatar is, and I don't like Avatar, but it was nominated for Best Picture,
Right.
is, like, nominated for Best Picture, is like, oh, that means it's really good. Instead of, like, no, most of these movies are really good. You just have this high horse that you're like, unless it's totally serious the whole time and everyone dies, like we can't love this movie. And like I think that, or this movie can't be taken seriously. And I think that's unfair as a concept and something that we should get by.
Yeah, I definitely understand that point. Yeah, I don't know. I just feel that it's just ridiculously legitimate.
I think you're totally fine rating it
I
that way.
totally get what you're saying. I agree. I think that it like Guardians 1 could have been like a Best Picture contender for sure. 2 not so much, but like it would never be because of the point you're making.
I mean, if you look at that year, it's always like where, you know, the concept of maybe the Oscars should really look at the 2 years behind, because like it's so hard to really judge the best movie in the same year you're in. Like you put Logan on your top 5 list, and I didn't, but I didn't mostly because we don't know what it's going to do.
Yeah, exactly. We've discussed that a lot.
It came out a month ago, you know, or I guess 3 months ago at this point, but it's hard to rate what your favorite movie from that year is. Like at the time, I think I rated Force Awakens over Mad Max when that year came out. But looking back at it, Mad Max is the best movie of that year. Followed by Force Awakens, but that has more to do with it.
So guys, we only have one last thing to do on the show here, and that's going to be called The Pitch. And we don't have a movie to pitch this week. We were kind of in this new territory because there's so many options, and we're full of a summer with all these big movies coming out.
I think we should just do The Mummy.
I was thinking about
people are
that.
like really want us to do The Mummy.
Yeah,
Brendan Fraser.
Stacey Howard's gonna kick the door down.
Yeah, Stacey Howard will need to be here. Let's tentatively maybe talk about doing The Mummy. We'll put something up on our Twitter.
It's relevant. There's a Mummy movie coming out.
We're excited.
There's this movie. The reason I don't want to see that movie is because there's not Brendan Fraser in the new one.
No, Brendan Fraser was so good in the
or
original
Rachel
Mummy.
Weisz.
But we have Tom Cruise, which is all we need on this show. Guys, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. If you want to follow along with any one of us, you can find me personally at Ben Bateman Media. You can find our podcast at AMA Podcast. Where can the folks find you guys?
You guys can find me at Andrew Ghai on Instagram and Twitter.
You can find me at Kes Wiley or the Masters of Modern podcast that Ben is also on.
Talking about Magic the Gathering. And be sure, guys, to check out the brand new Action Movie Anatomy Facebook fan page started by the listeners and watchers of this show. There's been so much interaction. It's been a freaking blast. It's absolutely awesome. And watch out for us on June 13th to the return to the Schmodown. Andrew and I are going to be returning to detonate a bomb in the hopes of late to the party, because those guys
We're going to kill them.
lose
We're going to kill them.
on camera.
Are your dads going to join this time?
I don't have a father.
Thanks for listening, guys.
Well, I just want to say thanks again. Thanks for coming in, Costa.
Thanks, guys.
Kessler.
Thanks for having me.
Miss being on camera with you. It's been so long since we've done this. So.
This is no longer a little makeshift bat cave where we duct taped a poster we stole from a comic book shot to a wood wall.
It was gifted to us. Guys, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll see you same time, same place next week.
Bye.
From producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire Popcorn Talk Network, we would like to thank you for tuning in. For questions or comments, be sure to visit popcorntalk.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of the Popcorn Talk Network.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Popcorn Talk Network or its owners or principals.